As post-election political negotiations drag on, there's some good news from the financial front. In its quarterly bulletin this week, the Reserve Bank noted that we've received a primary budget surplus for the first time in 15 years. In simple terms, revenue has exceeded expenditure. That's expenditure where we're not charged interest like loans. The Reserve Bank said this could help us put the brakes on increased debt. Redge Nkosi is an economist and Executive Director of Firstsource Money. Redge Nkosi, thank you so much for joining us on News at Prime. Finally, some good news when it comes to our economy. What can we attribute this surplus to?
Thanks for having me. Well, surplus is essentially because government has been cutting expenditure for quite a while now, and they're likely to continue cutting this expenditure into the near future. And then they think that way, when we achieve a surplus of that nature, it will arrest the debt that is now in the regions of 75%. So the markets are quite happy about that. But I think serious economists should not celebrate that. And the Reserve Bank, in saying that they're quite happy, shows to us that they're not really clear about what it means when you have to have budget surpluses of this nature. You cannot be bleeding the patient and thinking that he or she is going to survive in the long run. That's not the way to go about it. The only way they should be celebrating this is when, in fact, the economy is growing and these surpluses, whether it's primary or not, are achieved as a consequence of a growing economy, not as a consequence of having to take away the blood from this economy by cutting expenditure.
So a bit of a too soon, a premature celebration. Should we then have considered a different approach to get this surplus as opposed to, as you're saying, taking away the blood and cutting it out?
Well, absolutely. There are so many ways. The way the Reserve Bank and Treasury are going about this activity of fiscal and monetary is quite strange. In fact, we should be spending into the economy as we should, and is likely to be met. But you're not going to get growth when you actually cutting expenditure. Now, interest rates are quite high. There's no need for us to have all these high interest rates as we see today. The Reserve Bank can do better than that. It thinks that having high interest rates then perhaps is going to contain inflation. It doesn't. Experience tells us that. So we cannot be celebratory at all as a country. And frankly, the Reserve Bank tells us it doesn't understand what it's talking about, just as much as the Treasury and the markets, which celebrate this, tell us they don't really know what it is they're talking about. Remember, there's evidence here that we hang to when we talk about these. I mean, countries like, for example, Jamaica have been running a primary budget surplus of about 7.5% for so many years. What has happened? The cost to output, the cost to GDP has been so high that the country gets poorer and poorer, poorer and poorer. You cannot be celebrating with such surpluses. It's quite frankly disingenuous.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Nkosi, this surplus is actually money that should have been used for the betterment of the country, not necessarily to take it away to make the books look better. So this money that was taken away from the betterment, can it then be used, even though it was used to cut costs?
Well, it can be used quite productively. We have so many areas in the economy that are suffering. I mean, we have poor infrastructure. Infrastructure is hindering growth, isn't it? We have poor performance. TIs, money is being cut time and again. And how do we expect to boost the economy that way? So South Africa's way of going about the economy is quite frankly fundamentally flawed. That's the very reason we find ourselves in this economic mess, because the Treasury and the markets and indeed the Reserve Bank celebrate that things we shouldn't actually be celebrating. So yeah, there's so many ways. I think that this economy or the government itself can stimulate this economy. You can begin to be happy again. We can't be happy when in fact they're draining blood from our body.
Earlier you mentioned that one of the options as well, how we can use this money productively, is to arrest debt. When you think about some of our ailing SOEs as well, for instance, even ESCOM, right? Could this money then rather be used there? And do we get an indication that because there's this surplus, that it then can be used for our ailing SOEs?
Well, firstly, there's a problem with governance and SOEs, and I think we should arrest that. SOEs have a developmental mandate, and frankly, they should continue to work that way. They're very important. These are the SOEs that boosted the Africana economy before 1994. These are the SOEs that many Afrikaners reached before 1994, and we expect them to receive money from the state. The state has a lot of money, and therefore we can direct much of the expenditure to the SOEs. We don't have to call them bailouts, by the way. That's the job of the state, to boost state-owned enterprises so that they can continue to support the economy productively.
Moving forward, just before I let you go, Mr. Nkosi, as well, I mean, this was actually seen as a celebration, something to be proud of. This is how it has been put by the Reserve Bank as well. How should South Africans actually be receiving this news?
They should, in fact, be very sad. Any serious economist out there is not going to celebrate this. Quite frankly, it will tell you then that either this economist is not serious or is deliberately wanting to sabotage the economy. Even these markets that continue to celebrate this, markets are here for short-term gain, and it's for their own pocket. But when you're trimming money out of the economy, you're not supporting the overall economy. You're actually supporting a few individuals in the economy. This is why the markets are celebrating. But what do we mean when we say markets? We have just about 13, 17 or less companies that drive the markets, financial markets. And those people are just about quick back. South Africa is not about quick back. We have to support each and every person of the 62 or 60 million that we have. And markets do not do that. Therefore, it's unfortunate that we have some people who get confused because they don't understand macroeconomics properly and celebrate this issue of a primary budget surplus. Frankly, we should in fact be worried, because GDP per capita is going to continue to go down as a consequence of the Reserve Bank, as a consequence of the Treasury doing what they are doing right now. In fact, they're quite happy to work with the International Monetary Fund, which continues to tell us, no, go on with these primary budget surpluses. It's quite frankly ridiculous.
Mr. Nkosi, thank you so much for your time and helping us understand all things finance and what's going on now at the Reserve Bank. Really appreciate it. That is economist and director at Firstsource Money, Redge Nkosi.